This is Ed. Welcome back to Global TV Talk Show. And I hope you like my new background here. And let's say hello again to Tatiana St. Germain, coming to us today from Orlando. Thank you very much for being on Global TV Talk Show again. And we're going to be
Thank you for
talking about
having me.
leadership development.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's 2024, and it's an election year in the U.S. and crazy things going on. And businesses, this past week, business just boomed. It was just Zoom. It was so quiet previously, and then all of a sudden, bang, people are returning phone calls and making deals. Are you finding that too?
I think it depends on the industry, but yeah, there's usually some resolutions that are happening on a personal level and organizational level. Like, yes, we're going to invest in leaders, or yes, I'm going to invest in myself as a leader. So I do see that a little bit of that, but I think it's going to depend on the industry, how things progress throughout the year. There's just, as you pointed out, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty.
Ugh, it's freaky, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
leadership development. So, there's leaders. I was just reading something as a warm up to this. Two kinds of leaders, well, it's probably more than two kinds, but one is people oriented and the other way is process oriented. And of course, the people oriented is what I think is better. But there's a whole lot of people who are probably more mathematically inclined rather than human interest, um, that process, and they become more, I would guess, just do it. I'm telling you, I'm the boss, you do it. And the other way is more collaborative, yeah, I guess that's a good word. Would you say collaborative as opposed to dictatorial?
Yeah, nice versus tough. I've heard that terminology as well. I would say that there's as many leader types as there are leaders. Everybody is a unique combination of both traits, right? Going for the results and getting the results through people. We all understand that. That's common sense. But generally speaking, I would agree with you. There are leaders who like to build that reputation of a boss who achieves results. So they're very much they place higher priority on results, um, and they don't really care about the dead bodies that are left behind, as long as we achieve the results. And then there's another philosophy, if you will, where a leader wants to be managing people because they just love people. They want to interact with people. They want to be right there collaboratively working with them in the trenches. And generally speaking, those leaders are viewed as nice, but they may not be achieving results because the flip side of being nice, as opposed to being tough, is that they're not holding people accountable. So there's always a balance. You've got to be able to do both. And that is often a topic of my discussions, my coaching discussions, and my educational events on leadership development. You've got to recognize those traits inside yourself and see the value of that balance.
So this is really interesting. Personally, I like the people process rather than process, people oriented rather than these are the rules and this is what's expected of you. Now, that is almost a combination of the two anyway, but
Right.
do you think it's generational, meaning the younger people in the workforce, they're so tech oriented, they grew up with a phone in their hand, and I grew up watching cowboy movies on TV, so it's totally different, but dating myself for sure. But when you do an assessment and you advise CEOs and companies about talent assessment and onboarding and how you could how you need to have that in mind right from the get-go, not after they're already hired. So would you like to do a deep dive on that thinking and let our audience know how you're thinking about this and about the seemingly more people-oriented approach that's becoming in vogue right now?
It's definitely challenging to have four generations in the workplace, and it's not just age. It's more about the values and the beliefs that each person and maybe traditionally each stereotypically each generation may hold. Certainly technology changed things and kind of widened the gap between one generation and the next. I'm thinking of my 18-year-old and 17-year-old and how I grew up. And I know we often joke, yes, walked walked to school 2 miles in waist deep snow uphill both ways. And no phones, not even a party line until I turned 14. So it's a different world. And these kids basically grew up with a phone in their hand, like you said. So different expectations. So the one unifying solution to all of this is communicate. When you work with people who are like-minded, you can afford the luxury of assuming things because you're on the same wavelength. You let's say you watch cowboy movies together, you know what to expect. You have the same set of beliefs and values. So you probably don't need to over explain things. But unfortunately, then if we take you as a leader, if we put you in charge of a bunch of 18-year-olds, well, you need to over explain things. You have to be very clear, very precise. Don't assume anything. Do not leave anything to the imagination. And I'm having this conversation not only with you, our generation, with the younger generation as well. Young people don't know what they don't know. They have to be taught that just because they're all on the same wavelength and they can understand their abbreviations in their text messages, it doesn't mean that we can understand all of that. And it doesn't mean that's effective communication. It does not lead to you achieving the best results. And ultimately, all of us, all four generations and representatives of those four generations in the workplace want to achieve results. We want to be successful. We want to be fulfilled, and it's human nature. I've never met anyone who was fully engaged in losing.
Right.
Once you start losing, you're disengaged. You see ya. We're done here. Productive. This is how companies lose people. Turnover costs are going skyrocket. And that's why best in class research shows best in class companies use assessments. They invest in their people. They make sure they put the right people in the right positions. And certainly, most definitely, it's mandatory for the future of work for companies to invest in their high potentials and in their leaders. And again, majority of my conversations are around communication. What are the blind spots? How can we talk through all of that to tie all the pieces together? And then we can reconcile all the differences in beliefs. Because we're still all on the same bus. I know you like that reference to the seats in the bus. We're on the same bus. We're trying to get to the same direction.
So the younger people are distrustful of somebody like my age. And when I would say, hypothetically, you don't know what you don't know. And so I have to tell you, you have to learn. And they're going to say, well, who says I have to learn that? No, I say it. So there is a disconnect and animosity like from the get-go, seemingly.
It could be. People don't do things they're supposed to do, or they don't do things you ask them to do for three reasons typically. They don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, or they don't care. They don't know why you're asking. And this is where that last third piece is we as humans tend to kind of overlook, because It's like, well, it's common sense. Go do this because I told you to, because it worked for me. And that's how we do things here. That's how we've always done things here. This is what you do, and this is how you do it. That's not enough. Not when we have people who come from different backgrounds and again with different set of beliefs. We need to help them understand why is it that we do things the way that we do, and at the same time be open to an alternate approach. Maybe they have an idea. Well, how would you do it? Or why would do you understand why? Like, okay, so is there a better way to do it? So that's where that people focused approach you mentioned and the collaboration that has to occur between people in general, and certainly when we have multiple generations.
So I have to ask this, being an interviewer. What about this aspect, this scenario, male, female, masculine, feminine, um, and in a onboarding situation? Okay, so should that be conducted differently per generation, per setting, per audience? Is there different ways of doing this?
I think the way to show respect is to show that you're human and I'm human, and I'm going to treat you like a human. Everything else is irrelevant. Once again, studies show that it doesn't matter, everyone is capable of success. It's a matter of finding out what is it that you're wired to do, regardless of age, gender, or anything else. So what is it? What are your unique strengths as a human being? Because we're all born unique. And that's how you respect it, and that you build respect and trust with your candidates and future employees and existing employees. You have real conversations with them. You don't separate them into groups and then treat them differently or expect them to behave differently because they belong to a certain group, like we were just talking about different generations. Yes, there are certain trends, but at the end of the day, we're still all humans and we all want to be successful.
So what's the secret to doing this kind of conversation by Zoom versus in a room together?
Um, well, I think it's personal. Most people I know, I'd say 95% of people I work with are totally cool with Zoom. There's very little difference. I think it's more of a remnant of years past where we feel like I'll give you an example of my coaching situations, my coaching engagements. Um, when I start working with someone, we were having our first session or first conversation about coaching and how it's going to go. They might say, well, I prefer to be face to face. Well, and we can do hybrid, do some of these face to face, some of these via Zoom. And so I will accommodate their requests and we'll meet a couple of times in person, and then we'll meet a couple of times via Zoom. And what we find is that there's no difference. There's no difference as long as you give full attention without distractions to the person you're speaking with. I have not found differences. Now, when we talk about team building or taking a leadership team through a retreat or something of that nature, certainly being in person in the same room, physically being present, that's important. But there's ways to navigate Zoom environment, even with a group of people in the room, to be able to see their nonverbals and be able to communicate. It's, I guess you get out of it what you put in, and it goes back to respect and human connection.
So this is really just plain talk between two people here, virtual, of course, and I'm getting it. It's clear. And so it's almost like a moot point now to talk about remote versus in person. It's just some preference, and the hybrid approach, of course, makes sense. So
Yeah,
hybrid is here to stay for sure.
I would say so. I would agree. There's certainly industries and certain types of jobs that will
Right.
have to go one way or another more
Right. You
so.
can't build a car
Yeah.
uh, remote. You have to be on the
Yeah.
line. Right.
And I still would love to meet you in person. We always talk virtually.
Someday.
Yes, there of course, absolutely. Meeting somebody in real life, it just adds the next layer. But getting certain things accomplished across the world and collaborating across the world, um, I think it's just amazing what this platform gives us.